Well, hello, Barnes& Noble Book Club. It's really good to see everyone, albeit virtually. I'm Ewa Messer. I'm the producer and host of our podcast, Poured Over, and I am with Lexi Smith, my partner in all things book here at BNN, and of course, the woman of the hour, Amy Jo Burns, who I'm very happy to see. I keep seeing you online running around to our stores, which is awesome and fun and exciting, but now we get to do the thing. So I just want to remind everyone who's participating, there are spoilers in this conversation. I have so many questions and I'm dying for this. But if you are spoiler adverse and have not finished the book, guess what? You can watch this later on Barnes & Noble's YouTube channel. But in the past, we've tried giving people heads up when spoilers are coming. And you know what? Honestly, it just impedes the flow of the event. So if spoilers are not the thing you want, please join us later via the recording on Barnes & Noble's YouTube channel. In the meantime, if you would like to add a question to the chat module, just hover your mouse over the little bottom of the bar in your Zoom screen, hit the Q&A, and I will be watching that screen. You can also drop questions in the chat as well. If you have already given me your question via Eventbrite when you registered, I have those, and we're going to work them through as we go. We don't like to hold questions until the very end because that's boring, and we do not like boring at the Barnes & Noble Book Club. So, Lexi, I'm going to start with you because I can be patient for a couple seconds. I know why we chose Mercury for the BNN Book Club, but I'm going to ask you to share with our audience why we chose it for the BNN Book Club.
We chose this for the BNN Book Club because this is such a wonderful book about the complexities of family. What drew me in immediately about this book is that it really holds a tension between the love of family and belonging and having a role in a family and the costs that that can take on an individual person. And I thought that the way that Amy wrote about it was just so beautiful and so compelling that I had to find out what was going to happen with this family. And I'm pretty sure everyone else who's read this book feels the same way.
Amy, I have to ask you about
Yeah.
the opening. Let's just start with the opening
Yeah.
where we suddenly discover there's a hand in a place that we were not expecting. Let's talk about setting up this family because obviously we are going to go deep into this family because as I was saying to everyone else, Elise, I have questions about Lilise. But before we get there, let's start with the opening of the book because it's a banger of an opening.
So, I mean, this is what I'll say about the beginning. My dad is a
Mm-hmm.
roofer, and he's an incredible storyteller. And one of my favorite stories that he has told is when he went and fixed the church attic roof and steeple at the church that we
Mm-hmm.
went to that was in our hometown. And exactly what happens to Waylon in the book is what happened to my dad, you know, minus the hand. But he went through the counting room, went up the ladder, and like pulled down this hatch, and all these
Mm-hmm.
bats flew in his face. And I have always thought that that was just such a funny story. And the truth is, my dad has a million stories like that, but this was the
Right.
first one where it was in a place that I knew. And I just thought, what a killer opening for a book.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was writing it, I didn't actually think it was going to become a book because I wasn't convinced anybody would want to read about roofers. I just was writing it for myself. So
Right.
I was just throwing things in there like, well, what would he see up there? What if there was a body? What if a hand did fall down and we don't know whose hand it is, you know, how it got there, who's responsible, all those things. So when I started, I had no idea
Mm-hmm.
where it was going and I kind of wrote to surprise myself. Um,
Oh, that's a trick. Come on. This book
no,
is too well structured. No, no, no. This story is too well structured. I'm sorry. It zigs when you think it's going to zag. Like all of the people, I love Jade like the brothers, I get them, but like Patrick and Jade, like even the sort of secondary characters, I guess, that's what I'm going to call them,
yeah.
are really vibrant and alive and have personalities. And like you're juggling all the siblings, you're juggling the parents. I mean, even sorry, mom, nurse mom. Why am I Ruth,
Ruth.
thank you.
Yeah,
Even Ruth, like
yeah,
Ruth kind of leaves. I mean, well, she
yeah.
has to, but like she leaves and she's still very sort of present in my experience of the book
hmm
as a reader. So I'm going to ask though, who showed up first for you?
Waylon.
Okay.
The first thing I wrote was that opening scene where he is crouching behind the baseball bleachers and everything. That's a memory that I had from when I was maybe 9, going to a
Okay.
baseball field with my brother, played Little League, and this guy that my mother knew was smoking a cigarette, and he looked at my mom and he said, "Please don't tell my wife." And my mom was like, "Oh, sure, sure, no problem." And that really stuck with me at 9 years old. I just remember thinking, like, why does he want to hide it from his wife? And I guess I have been thinking about that for about 30 years. And when I sat down to write, and I said, what if I wanted to write about roofers? That's just where my brain went.
Hmm.
And it was just like a really fun scene to write. And again, like I said, I sat down and I wrote that thinking, there's no way this could be a book. But all of a sudden I saw this guy crouching back there, and what is he? He's got on roofers Levi's. They've got tar all over him. What is
Hmm.
he hiding from? And it just, he became one of the men that I knew, that I kind of grew up
Right.
looking up to, and that's when I think of home, that's what I think of, is roofers. And so Waylon was the first, and at the beginning I thought, okay, this is going to be Waylon's story. And then pretty soon his wife had something to say,
Yeah.
and then pretty soon his brothers had something to say. I actually didn't think I had the chops to pull off as many voices as I did. And that's kind of why the way that it's written, you kind of get a bunch with Marley, and then you kind of get a bunch from Shay and a bunch from Baylor, because it was kind of like everybody was like sitting around a dinner table, and then
Right.
somebody would, I would write something, and then there'd be somebody else there who'd be like, wait, 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 wait. That's not how I remember it. And
Yeah.
then you kind of get their side. So it felt like I was like overhearing people that I already knew kind of
Mhm.
talking about what happened.
I mean, the structure totally works for me, but Lexi, I'm dying to know who your favorite character is. I think I might know, but I really want to know.
This was a tough one for me, because I loved all of the characters so
Mm.
much. I think Jade is my favorite
Yeah.
character.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
it's Jade. Yeah. Like,
Yep. I
talk
love her.
about a true blue best friend, like in
Hmm.
Yes.
every sense of the word. Can you
Hmm.
tell us a bit more about how Jade came to be?
Yes, I realized pretty quickly that what I didn't want from Marley was for her to just get swallowed up by all these men. And
Yeah.
it was really important for me when I was writing this to actually reflect what I think it is like to be a woman who is in like a male dominated house and a male dominated industry like Marley
Hmm.
is. And a huge, huge part of my experience in a town like that is you do have your, let's go bury this body out in the woods best friend. That is like, I don't need an explanation. You can call me in the middle of the night. I mean, I have like three of those best friends from home.
Hmm.
That's just what I really wanted for Marley, because I wanted her to fight to feel at home in Mercury. And I think in order to do that, it's not just marrying into a family, you've got to have your people. And so Jade has that bit of me that is like, I would want nothing to do with this family. Like, I would run the other way. So, that whole thing where, Jade is like, are you safe here? Like, are you
Yeah.
sure? There's something in me that is like, that is so what I would be if this were my best friend. I'd be like, you have got to get out of there. So I wanted there to be a voice that kind of counteracts Marley's just desire to jump in and help and fix, that is like, you don't have to fix this, because I feel
Hmm.
like that's what a best friend does, right? They can be honest with you, but they don't do it in a mean way. They do it in a supportive way, and like you can kind of disagree. So she was super fun to write, just with somebody that was like, I'm not into the Josephs, like I don't buy into all this stuff that they're amazing, like I'm good on my own.
Well, that's the power of family mythology, right? Like,
Yeah.
even if it's not actually your family, right, and you're marrying in or you're somehow newly connected to these folks, family mythology is really powerful. And Mick, I
Hmm.
mean, I got to tell you, I'm glad I only had to meet him on the page, because I think I would have gotten tired of him in real life.
Yeah.
He's just, and I say that with respect, but like,
Yeah.
he doesn't have space in his orbit for his children or his wife.
No, not at
And I understand, like, I cannot imagine what it, well, I can't imagine what it was like for him to serve in Vietnam, but to come home and just not have the physical and emotional space for anyone else. And yet he has a family. He gets, he's already married. He has a family. He builds this business. I think honestly, he'd like to be a potter in a shack somewhere. Like,
Oh,
I
for sure.
don't think he was cut out to be a husband and a dad, and yet, like, so many members of his generation, right, like, here he is,
Yep.
and kind of smacking his kids upside the side of the head, and yet it's really important to him to be like, this is my business,
Yep.
this is my bank account. I built this. And it's not, I built it for my sons, it's, I built this. It's
Yeah.
like, dude, when Baylor figured out and Marley figured out that he was taking money from the accounts and just doing whatever with it, I was like, oh, that's no, that's really bad. That's so bad.
But
But
it's
here's
kind
the
of
thing.
this idea where there's like a man who's taught he deserves to be
Yeah.
head of the household and all
Yeah.
those things. And he has no emotional backbone or the character that deserves that kind of role, that
Hmm.
deserves to be making decisions on the behalf of the livelihood of the entire family. I mean,
Hmm.
he has no business being that person, and yet that's sort of exactly the way, especially in the 90s, like our culture was okay, we build everything around this idea of the traditional family. So I
Yeah.
kind of wanted to play with that and say, like, is this really as good as
Hmm.
we all thought it was?
But I also love the idea that it is set in the 90s. There are no cell
Mhm.
phones. We're not Googling stuff. Like, there is, like, we really are in this world. And it is slightly claustrophobic in a
Yeah.
good way. In a
Yeah.
good way. It's super compelling to read. But I do love the fact that, you have to drive from point A to point B. You can be surprised. You have to go find someone. You can't just do, where's my phone? All of these things. Lexi, do you have a favorite moment from sort of like the early piece as we're meeting everyone, as we're being introduced to let's step outside of that introduction because wow, that opening chapter, but like as we're sort of meeting everyone.
I think the first few interactions between Marley and Elise
Hmm.
really stood out to me. I think their relationship is absolutely fascinating, how it develops over the course of the novel. And like you said earlier, Miwa, it zigs where I thought it was going to
Hmm.
zag. And the interactions they have between when they first meet to when they're basically burying the body to, after Elise passes away. I just think the seeds that you planted, Amy, in those first few scenes, what they grew into was absolutely not at all what I was expecting. And I loved it.
Oh, thanks.
So I'm looking at some questions from the audience from the Eventbrite, and Quincy McNair, if you're in the audience, I didn't check, but I have your question right in front of me. When I saw the book cover and read about it, I thought about Flannery O'Connor's short story, Good Country People. Was that ever an inspiration, or like even did you hold it close by as you were writing?
Huge, huge compliment. I have to say, I wasn't, and I didn't. This was the first of the three books that I've written where I did not look at anything I had. I didn't
Okay.
read anything. This was something that I thought, I need to do this. It needs to come from here because this is a family story to me. So I was like,
Mm-hmm.
I just didn't want to rely on other things. And
Mm-hmm.
I had, before I started to write the book, I had just been in a few different situations back to back where I had some people kind of communicate to me that I didn't deserve to be sort of in like the literary space that I was in because I wasn't good enough. And which is bizarre to think, after having two books that would happen, but it does. And I had to get to a point where I said, you know what, I have to shut everything else out and just write about what matters to me. So
Right.
that's why I didn't read anything. I only listened to music. That was kind of it because I just wanted to go deep into what I felt like I already knew.
Okay,
You,
now I have to ask, was
mhm.
there music that inspired the novel? What were you listening to while you were writing this?
90s all the time. I made such a long playlist, and I started, one of the ways that I kind of got into the minds of the characters was I was thinking about, like, what were their favorite songs? Like, what do they play when they're happy? What do they play when they're upset? And that kind of helped fill out a character. Like
Hmm.
Marley, for example, likes Roxette, and that kind of gives you a feeling of like what she's like at a party. And Jade has a lot of my musical preferences. Like she likes Janet Jackson and Sade, and so she's got like a nice, like cool vibe to her. So I just made a list of all the songs that when I hear that it kind of hits you in the chest and it takes you right back to some moment where you were in the 90s. And because that's really what I wanted the book to feel like too when you read it. It just takes you somewhere, it grabs you right, and it won't let you go. So it was 90s all the time, and it was super fun.
I can imagine that soundtrack. I can totally imagine that soundtrack. But hey, I want to go back to something you just said a second ago, though, about this idea of, this intact family led by a
Yeah.
certain kind of dude, all this, because the women, Elise, I'm going to have a harder time shaking Elise, I think, than I am anyone else in this book. And I loved Jade, but Elise feels tragic to me. And she makes some deliberate choices that I would like to think I wouldn't make, but I'm obviously not in her place. This is a very different time. There are financial concerns. There's a
Yeah.
whole different thing happening here. And I do have empathy for her in some ways, but man, she was rough. She was rough on Marley. She was kind of rough on her own sons.
Yeah.
And I couldn't tell if she actually liked her husband or not. Love and like are two different things. And
Yeah.
I'm not sure
It's
she liked Mick all that much. So can we just spend some time with Elise? Because there are some other folks going, where did Elise come from?
Yes. Oh my goodness, I love this question because I loved writing her, and
Mm-hmm.
I have gotten two kind of responses to Louise. That was like, "Who the heck is this woman?" That's one response I get. And the other one that I get is, "I know somebody just like her." So, where did Elise come from? I think what I wanted to get across in Elise is what happens when a woman actually is not really able to make any choices for herself.
Right.
Because Elise can't even really be kind to herself, and it just makes her shrivel on the inside. All she has done is kind of give to other people, but she
Mm-hmm.
kind of does it with a closed fist. You know what I mean? And um, and I think that's because she's never had anybody extend any mercy to her. She doesn't know what it feels like. So her way of surviving has been to say, these are all the right things to do in life, and these are all the wrong things. And if I follow these rules, I'm going to have a good life. I'm going to be happy. My children will be happy. And she gets, 10 or 20 years into this lifestyle, and she realizes it has been such a lie. And she feels like her father lied to her. Um, and she just feels, I think she feels two things. I think she feels cheated,
Mm-hmm.
and I think she does not want to be a cautionary tale. Like, that's, I didn't want people to read it and be like, Elise is a victim of what happened to her and that she didn't have a choice, because I don't know many women that kind of camp there, say, I was a
Mm-hmm.
victim and I didn't have, like, she was somebody who is like, I'm going to make the best of it, but it's going to be gritty, and it's, I'm not going to be nice about it.
Mm-hmm.
um, I just look at her as somebody who's not had a lot of care given to her, and then she's then is unable to kind of give it to anybody else.
I love that answer about Elise. I do. I felt a little bit of grief for her though. I really
Yeah.
like, as sort of brittle as she is, I just, and then you compare her to Ruth, who's kind of like, I'm gonna live my life and I'm gonna do my
Yeah.
thing. And we do have a question. I just saw it here as I was noodling through. Someone was asking, oh, Jill Shota was asking, why wasn't Ruth's character more developed in the story? But
Mhm.
I sort of feel like Ruth wasn't meant to stay. That Ruth, that's what Ruth does. Ruth goes where
Yeah.
she needs to go.
I would say two things with Ruth. I think Ruth probably deserves her own book with her own story where she can be the
Yes,
center.
please. Yes, please.
And I would say Ruth is the most well-adjusted person in the book. She doesn't need to learn things the
Mhm.
hard way like everybody else. She doesn't have these huge hang-ups. And I loved writing her character because I just felt I wanted to write a mom that actually says the right thing at the right time. And I
Yeah.
wanted it to be a mom who is in a sort of what back then might have been considered like a non-traditional,
Right.
she's not married, whatever. I just wanted her to be the one that's got her act together.
Right. Right.
And so she was super fun to write.
Okay. And Julia Fuchs is wondering, Julia, I hope I said your last name properly. I found Shea Baby to be such an interesting character. Do you have any plans to have him with his own standalone?
Let me tell you, I can't tell. I want them all to have their own books, which I think is unrealistic. And
Yep.
it's because I have such a love for them. And what I like about the ending of this book is that it kind of feels like a beginning for each of the characters. So in my mind, whether I write it or not, Shea Baby goes and just lives an incredible, amazing life. And he
Yeah.
finds love. Is it with Patrick? I changed my mind about it, maybe, maybe not. Because I feel like Patrick deserves some love and care too, but maybe
Hmm.
not, you know, he needs to learn some things first before he's worthy of somebody like Shay. But yeah, in my mind, Shay goes and has his own adventures for sure.
And hey, Ayanna Brown, you are right. Single moms are amazing. But you're also curious to know if Amy had other titles in mind for the book. Why did you choose the location of the events in Mercury? And you have a connection to the town that becomes sort of the literary inspiration for Mercury, right?
I sure do. So Mercury is based on my own hometown. My hometown is called Mercer. It is in Western Pennsylvania. And I wrote about my hometown in my first book, which is a memoir called Cinderland. And I changed the name there too, because I really wanted the town to feel like its own planet. Like it was a place where it wasn't easy to get to and it wasn't easy to leave. Because small towns can feel that way, like very insular, you know?
Yeah.
So that's why I changed the name. But then a lot of the landmarks that appear in the book are actual places. Like I mentioned, the church is real. Um, the house that the Josephs lived in is very much based on the Victorian in town that my grandparents lived in when I was growing up. You know, the post office, the ball field. I love creating characters and just putting them in a place that I already knew because it just makes it feel lived in. You know what I mean? Like already there's this sense of like intimacy and things are all kind of old and falling apart, but it's still love. So
Hey, someone's wondering too, Jennifer Waldrop, who was your favorite character to write?
my favorite character to write was definitely Baylor because he was the person I knew everybody was going to hate at the beginning, probably hopefully. And it's been my experience. Everybody, you might not know what life is like in West Pennsylvania, but everybody has a Baylor in their life. Everybody has one that's kind of somebody that might, you know, get themselves together and might not, and who is not good with words, but like something will just happen that they will all of a sudden have this moment of extreme self-sacrifice and bravery, and then when you look back, you can kind of see all of the bunny trail that leads to it. But you know, sometimes like this guy is a real jerk, you know. So he just, I wrote in a way for him to win me over, and I just fell in love with him. So it's always fun to write somebody that is, you know, says the wrong thing at the wrong time, makes people upset. That's always fun to write. But it was also fun to give him a redemption arc after he falls really low, to say what might his life become if he were determined that that's not going to be the last thing that ever happens to him. That's not going to be the end of his story. Like if we wanted him to sort of pull himself together, what would it look like? What would it take?
Right. Hey, Lexi,
Speaking,
before you jump in, Amy, we're going to try muting and unmuting you because the static is pretty significant on your line. Technology. But so what we're going to do is we're going to unmute you when you're ready to answer. It's slightly distracting. So apologies all. We don't usually have tech issues like this, but today the stars seem to be doing a thing. Sorry about that, Lexi. Why don't you go ahead and we're going to figure out what we can do with the tech.
I'm really happy that we're talking about Baylor, because for me, the scene where Baylor kind of redeems himself is when he's the one who goes to get Marley after she's left. Did you always know it was going to be Baylor who went to get Marley?
Yes, I think I did because I wanted him to be able to do something nice for his brother that his brother wasn't able to do for himself. Because Waylon is kind of known as that guy who's always going to do the right thing. He's always there for the family. And so I just wanted him to start doing some unexpected things because, you know, he's the person that, you know, might not say the right thing, but he will show up for you. He will drive the distance or pick you up, that sort of thing. So, and it was a much better scene that way because there's so much tension already between them.
Yeah, I'm not sure Waylon had it in him to get in the car. Like, I don't see him doing it. I mean, yes, he's a good guy, and yes, he loves his wife and he loves all of his people in his family. But Waylon's a little too concerned with appearances to a certain extent, where it's like, well, I have to be the stand-up guy, and it's like, well, actually, no, you can be just a guy. You can try to be part of your family, and just the idea that he's got this sort of approach where it's like, I should fix it, I should fix it, I should
Yeah.
fix it, and it's like, oh, puppy, you can't. Like you just can't. But I loved the fact that it was Baylor who showed up on Marley's door, and she was like, "What? You really?"
The fun thing I think about writing Waylon was thinking about in what circumstances is doing the right thing kind of the wrong thing. because
Yeah.
he's so hell bent on being like, I'm going to do the right thing, I'm going to do the right thing, that it kind of becomes the wrong thing. It kind of makes his family be like, come on, dude, you know? And that was kind of fun to think about, like what makes that person who's super honorable
Right.
be a pain in the butt to everybody else.
One of the scenes that really broke my heart was at Elise's funeral when
Yeah.
he made that comment about how loving someone is knowing you're going to let them down. I was like, oh my goodness, dude, you need to be a little less hard on yourself.
Yeah. He definitely was a little broken. I'm going to use Lexi's moment to come back to Elise for a second, because we have Julia Davids asking a question and Elise Devlin. And Julia's saying, I think Elise would have been a totally different person if her husband hadn't been drafted into the Vietnam War. Wasn't he a different person before he went? And I think you make that pretty clear, that he wasn't the same dude, that he really did get broken. And I think that happened to a lot of men in his age group, right? And then Elise Devlin is wondering why Elise lost touch with her sisters.
I think it is because, first of all, I don't think Elise would have even met Mick had he not gone to war. So even the fact that they were thrust into the same place at the same time and sort of felt this like urgent push, death might be looming, this urgent push to get married. There were just so many things that under normal circumstances would never have happened. I think Elise lost touch with her sisters because she had been taught that the pinnacle of a life is to serve a man and serve him well. And she got so focused on that that she forgot some of the things that had always mattered to her, the things that were life sustaining for her. So it was kind of just, I don't think it was on purpose. I think it was just sort of year after year getting swallowed in this life with, 4 men in her house to take care of. That all of a sudden, she kind of had lost a lot of things of herself. So I think it was just sort of like she just got swallowed in this mess that was, Mick Joseph.
Yeah. Hey, can I ask I'm going to pull a question from the book club discussion questions at the back of the book, just because I am dying to know. I really am. And excuse me while I scroll down for a second, because it's deep in my notes. What do you think happens to the Joseph family after the book ends?
I think Shay moves to Pittsburgh, maybe
Mm-hmm.
goes to art school, something like
Yeah.
that. I think um, Waylon and Baylor run the business, but they don't
Yeah.
let Mick be part of it anymore.
Yeah.
And I think Marley gets her title. I think Marley becomes vice president of the company, and I think they change the name of the company to something else. And it continues to grow and sort of branch out, and they hire more people and, have kids and live life and still have the same, I think, complications and all that stuff that comes with owning your own business and having it run out of your house and having your kids there at the same time. I think all of that stays the same, but I think Marley becomes more comfortable in her own skin and kind of calling herself the entrepreneur that she is.
I think too, Elise is pretty formidable.
Yeah.
Right. And I think Marley really does need that moment where she realizes that Elise is not quite all there, like the dementia is really serious. I just, okay, where do people come in? Do we think Mick was deliberate? Do we think Elise really did want to die? We don't get a full story, which I appreciate. I like not knowing, but I'm wondering if you do have more of an opinion than you put on the page.
I do have an opinion. My
Okay.
opinion is Marley's opinion, where
Okay.
this selfish guy said, I'm going to take care of this because I can't handle it.
Yeah.
I don't care what my wife actually wants or what she needs, but I'm taking care of this, what serves me best. And I think
Yeah.
Marley knows exactly. She sees it and she calls it out, and she wants him to spend the night in jail. So that's my opinion. I do think, though, that this is the kind of situation where you kind of can see another story or a couple
Right.
other sides, And what I thought was really interesting about that scene is thinking about Marley's watching this play out, and she's thinking who she identifies with is Elise, right? But
Right.
then Ian is also watching it play out. He doesn't identify with his mom. He
Right.
identifies with his dad. And that, I think, is like that seed that maybe really cracks open between their relationship, and that is what they have to fix, which takes a while.
Lexi, do you think that's the biggest secret in this family? Do you think that's the thing that's really clawing at all of them, or do you think it's something else?
No, I think there are so many secrets that
Yeah,
these people have kept from each other over the years that that might be the secret that has broken the camel's back. But I feel like everyone in this family feels so boxed into the roles that they're playing. They're so siloed from each other in these
right.
ways that there's so many more secrets and so many other unsaid things that are
Hmm.
really the issue at play here.
Hmm. I mean, I loved sort of watching. There were times where I was reading and I felt like everyone was on a chessboard. I'm not a chess player, so I am kind of reaching for metaphor. Apologies to anyone who is actually a chess player, but watching how everyone was sort of trying to figure out what they thought the family needed, and then maybe they thought about their own needs, except for Mick. Mick always put himself first, but even then, he still wasn't necessarily getting what he needed because he couldn't figure out the people around him. And it really, there are moments of this book that are just absolutely hopeful and joyful but they're also like, you've balanced the tragedy and the good stuff really, really well. Like Elise's funeral, I was just kind of like, oh, I need a minute. I need a snack. I need to
Yeah.
put this down because Waylon and Baylor at that, oh, oh, wow.
I just, writing all that stuff, there it just felt so true to real life that you do
Mhm.
have these moments of extreme joy and extreme loss right up against each other, sitting in the same room with each other. I think that is what it means to be a member of a family, is those times when you're like, I love these people, and then you're like, I hate these
Yes.
people. And getting the funeral scene took me a long time to get right because the first
Mhm.
few drafts that I did, I had Waylon kind of go up there and say all the right things and kind of, all. But then maybe one of the last drafts I did, I wanted to give him this line that just shows that he has been gutted, and so that's kind of where those things came from. And I wanted to really capture both ends, just that joy that you feel in life in a big family, but then also that huge sense of loss and suffocation, which you
Mhm.
mentioned, kind of
Mhm.
claustrophobic.
I mean, big families are big families. It can happen in little families too.
Yep.
Lexi, when you were reading Mercury, like how was it? How were you feeling as you were going through? Because there's a lot of like big emotion, little emotion, medium emotion, and I mean, obviously that's the joy of reading this thing. But you as a reader, I mean, you and I had lots of conversations about this in the office. But why don't we bring everyone else in?
I think there were so many small moments in the book that really struck me. One of them was the realization that Marley had about how ingrained Waylon was in terms of his role in the family. It's before she leaves when she realizes like we're still in his childhood bedroom. There are still like socks that his mom washed for him in this bedroom. And there's a part of him that like he likes this role. He likes knowing that he is Elise's son rather than my husband or
Right.
just his own person. And it was those small moments that I found the most devastating in this
Hmm.
book because they're so true to life. Just these little glimmers you captured.
Hey, a couple of questions from different people. Do we get a film version? Are we getting a streaming version? Are we getting a big screen version? What's happening here?
Maybe no news on that yet.
Okay.
I hope it will happen. I think it would make a really great on-screen adaptation.
Yeah.
So I would be all for it. It would be super fun. It would be nice, I think, to be able to see some of the visuals of like roofers up, looking over
Hmm.
a city. So it would just be a really nice thing to get to see too. I hope it happens.
Okay, fingers crossed. We also have a lot of craft questions. So, Lexi, you and I get to nerd out with the
Yeah.
audience. But let me just pull this up for a second to make sure I have these correct. But I honestly, I like craft questions too, even though it will never um, be more than asking questions for me. So, how did Nancy Andrews is wondering, how did writing Shiner influence Mercury? And I'm shouting out Shiner because that was a BNN Discover pick back in the day.
It sure was. I love this question because I have to really think about the answer because the truth is, I wrote a different book between Shiner and Mercury.
Oh,
So,
seriously?
yes. And it turned out that that book just needed a little bit of extra time to marinate.
Okay.
So I set it aside and was feeling a little bit lost and thinking, oh, maybe 2 books is all I have in me. Maybe that's it,
Mm-hmm.
you know? And I think remembering Shiner, it reminded me, I think, how powerful it is to like write about home and what it
Yeah.
means and how
Yeah.
moving it is. I think it reminded me that Shiner is a gutsy book.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't consider myself a gutsy person in my personal life. So there
Right.
was something nice about looking at that book, and maybe it's only I can see it when I read it, but I thought, okay, that person who wrote that book is still inside me, you know? And then I would also say it's just really great evidence that I don't have to have perfect circumstances to finish something. You
Right.
know, when I wrote Shiner, I was pregnant twice, nursing twice. I mean, not sleeping, writing here and there. So I thought,
Whew.
if I can, yeah, if I can write a book in those
Mm-hmm.
circumstances, I can do it again. I can finish something again. I can love something again. Because that's what happens too. When you write a book, you fall in love with it and you just feel like, I'll never be okay again if this is not the book that I'm writing for the rest of my life. It really feels that way. And it takes a long time to kind of fall in love with something else. So going from Shiner to Mercury proved to me that I could fall in love again, and
Mm-hmm.
it could be such a wonderful experience to write another book.
Right.
So, yeah.
And we have a couple of different variations on how do you organize your ideas? Are you an outliner? I mean, obviously we've talked about how you love to open with a pop.
Yeah.
And as a reader, I am grateful that you like to open with a pop. As I'm going to speak for Lexi, because really we have talked about this a lot in the office. We have been incessantly talking about this. But let's just talk about process for a second, because there are a lot of like, okay, it sounds like new fiction writers in the audience, and I'm so glad you guys are here. But I'm gonna put all of your questions sort of together into one, and we're going to get you one answer now. So outline, no outline, reading, rewriting, all of this good stuff. Where are we going?
I wish I could outline. I really do. It seems so orderly, and you kind of start in one place and you end in another. I am so jealous of writers who do that. I cannot do that to save my life. This is my process. I kind of get a very small idea. Maybe it is a husband sitting hiding behind bleachers smoking a cigarette or something, and that's it. Or the beginning of Shiner was like somebody's on fire, right? I mean, so it's almost like half an idea. It doesn't even feel like a fully formed idea. But then
Right.
I get a notebook and I just write by hand, and I try to get full drafts without stopping to say, let me research that, or let me second guess myself. I try to just sit with my notebook and write out whatever comes into my mind. It is very, very messy. So what that means is oftentimes I will start something that doesn't go anywhere. I have a lot of things that I've gotten into and I said, oh, this won't work for whatever reason. So the truth is it's not an efficient way to work, but what it does do is I am surprised by myself every single time when I kind of just let myself go. And I think surprising will trump efficiency every single time.
Yeah.
So after I get that draft down, then it's like, okay, now I really have to pull out
Okay.
the editor side of me and be like, okay, let's get this, let it make sense. But for that first draft, I let that writer part of me do whatever she wants to do.
I mean, it sounds to me, and this is true of writer's life, like Leif Enger too. The writing is actually in the rewriting.
Yeah.
And it isn't just I get a draft out and then I send it off to where it needs to go. It's really you chip away and you chip
Yes.
away and you chip away. And I mean, I've read obviously both Shiner and Mercury, and I feel like it's voice. And Lexi, I mean, you've read both as well too.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you and I are on the same page when it comes to voice. And it sounds like, again, lots of rewriting.
It absolutely is. I
Okay.
think it takes a long time to kind of figure out like what you want the vibe to be, which is why I really like making playlists
Yep.
because it kind of helps me zero in on the mood that I want the reader to feel while they're reading. It helps me with word choice. And oftentimes what it is taking a paragraph that's maybe 5 sentences and taking the best little bit out of each sentence and sweating it down into one. I do that a lot. So oftentimes my first drafts will be long and there's not a lot of good material, but there's some, nuggets in there that's what I keep. And then it is
Right.
just a sort of series of sweating it down and sweating it down and keeping what's best and trying to let the rest go, which is heartbreaking. But in the end, you have this thing that's got a vibe, and that's what I like. I like it when they have it. It's got a specific vibe.
So, hey, Katie Wasteland is wondering, what did you learn about yourself after writing Mercury?
Um, I think I would say two things. For my writer self, I think I would say I learned to let that writer part of me breathe, let her play, let her relax, and say, this is doesn't have to be so life and death to you all the time. Why don't we remember what we like about this, you know? I had such a good time writing this book. I just loved it. It gave me so much joy. And then I think personally, I always knew this, but writing this just reminded me that I love being a roofer's kid. I love being a roofer's daughter. It is such an honor, and I think what this book really did for me, because I've always been there, I've always been around it, but I think what it felt before was that this is my dad's thing, it's my brother's thing, it's my uncle's thing. Writing this book made it feel like it's my thing too. Like I found a way to sort of say, this is my inheritance too. This is my legacy. I have this in my blood too. The same way I think that my mom did when she, went in and did payroll and figured out insurance and all that stuff. Just finding a way to say, this is what this looks like on me. This is what this roofer's life looks like on me. I think was just a really, really special thing.
And I knew this was going to happen. We're bumping up against time. Lexi, did I miss anything you really wanted to raise? I feel like I'm walking around with your notes in my head, but I think we hit everything, yeah?
We hit all the notes. This
Yeah,
was
okay.
fantastic.
That's what I thought. Amy, is there anything you want to say to Barnes & Noble Book Club readers before we go? Because like I said, I knew this was going to happen, and frankly, we could keep going for hours, but we do kind of have to let people go back to their lives.
I think I just wanted to say thank you. Thank you for showing up, for reading the book, for being thoughtful about it. I love getting to talk with readers, and this has been such an incredible group, an incredible experience. So hearing that the book resonated with you, that you fell in love with the characters like I did, there's no better feeling for a writer. So thank you for making this just such a memorable experience for me. It just reminds me like why I think books are so important. It doesn't matter what kind of background you have. These stories bring us together, and I'm just really thankful for that.
And that is the perfect note to end. So I'm going to say thank you, everyone, for joining us this afternoon. It's always really fun to hang out with B&N Book Club readers. You guys are, as we say in Boston, wicked smart. So thank you, Amy Jo. It was really great to see you. Lexi, I'll see you upstairs in a minute. But thanks again. Our next book club event is coming in March. You can always find out the details on bn.com. Or better yet, you can go hang out with your own booksellers at your local B&N. So thanks all. Bye, guys.
Bye.